I am so delighted to be here. This is a house. I used to be in a house church. It met at my house, literally. Sometimes we rotated houses. And there's something very homey and community building in being in a home, in a house. So in some ways, you're really blessed to be in this space. You think about that. Now, when I grew up in my church where we said grace, a prayer of thanks before each meal. And I remember some of us would go out to eat after church. We were young adults. And one person actually said this grace: rub-a-dub-dub, 3 men in a tub, thanks for the grub, amen. I was like, as young as we were. But the one I really liked was called the Johnny Appleseed Grace. The Lord is good to me, and so I thank the Lord for giving me the things I need, the sun and rain and the apple seed. The Lord is good to me. John Chapman was born in the middle of the 1700s. And at 18, he persuaded his half-brother to go with him, kind of leading a nomadic life in Ohio. That ended when their father decided to bring the whole family there. But what he did was become an apprentice to an orchardist, which I never heard of, orchardist. And he's known for planting apple seeds, apple trees, kind of the reputation is willy-nilly, but no, he was much more methodical than that. He bought parcels of land and grew nurseries. He seeded nurseries, built fences around the nurseries to keep the wildlife or livestock out of the seeds, and then get someone to take care of the nursery. And he'd come back every year or two to tend to it. The interesting thing about John Chapman is that he was very focused. Most of us are kind of going around life wondering what's our purpose or whatever. He was very focused. Two things. He planted the gospel as a Swedenborgian, which is, when I look that up or remember what it was, it's kind of, to me, a little bit Unitarian. And believing that all of life is God. And the other thing he did was plant apple trees all over Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana. So they dubbed him Johnny Appleseed. And in cartoons, like I remember the Disney cartoon, it's like people are grabbing the apples to eat in hand. They're baking pies, they're baking apples. You're shaking your head. Yeah, actually, he didn't believe in grafting. So the seeds he planted were wild varieties. And I read that, you know what wild varieties are good for only? Making cider. Oh, you know this story. Yeah, so of course people welcomed him. He was bringing them, alcohol. But whatever, he is acclaimed in so many places. There are 2 museums. He's on a postage stamp. There are statues of him because this man had very clear goals. His life was planting the gospel and sowing seeds. Now, what does it mean to sow seeds? We heard Carol talk about how thoughts are seeds, that we have to be careful about what we think, because we send those messages out even unconsciously or maybe through our body language. If you're thinking angry, hateful, jealous, whatever, that's what you are sowing. Now, this is the interesting thing. It's a physiological, probably know this, phenomenon, but when it doesn't matter how you actually feel, when you smile, it tricks your brain into thinking you're actually happy. You can change your attitude in a split second by pulling up the corners of your mouth, smiling. And it is amazing. It's also very good for your mental health that you go around in your day making positive impressions, just as simple as just smiling at someone as you pass them by. It's amazing. Smiling at people, saying a nice word. I remember during the pandemic, on occasion, I would thank the grocery clerks for working because they faced health dangers by doing their jobs. We think of harvest as a big thing when actually harvest starts with planting small little seeds. And you don't realize the power that you have in the small things that you do cumulatively. I remember when I had my baby and I thought as I was bathing him, when will he be big enough to be able to sit? Because I had to hold him as I bathed him. And that kind of daily care that parents give their children, it's really small, but it's tremendous in its influence because you learn later on that people who have terrible problems because they were not really nurtured as babies or children, it's almost impossible to get them to change. Because who's going to put in those hours of caring for you the way a mother or father should have? You know, the strokes on their back, the tussling of their hair, the little kisses, the positive thing, you know, great, good. We are powerful beings with our words, not just our thoughts, but our words. So make the words count. You think that you're just one person, but one person multiplied makes for a huge change in the world. You know, I was reading about Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, and he once said, it's really embarrassing that after 45 years of research and study, the best advice I can give someone is try to be a little kinder. 45 years and you come up with this. But that's all he could come up with. You want to make a transformation in the world, in yourself. It can be as simple as try to be a little kinder. Think of someone else. Think of someone else and how they're feeling. This is especially true for children because they're so impressionable. And frankly, as one of my teachers said, she discovered, you know, at heart, we're all 5-year-olds. So remember that. Maybe we don't need all those hugs, but they help. And the adult version of hugs is compliments. You know, the most important thing you can do for someone is to acknowledge their presence. And that can be a smile, that can be a compliment. But to know that someone says in words or not, I see you, you're important, you're on this earth and you make a difference. So I see you. I was thinking about the seeds planted in my own life. My mother read to us, such a small thing. She read to us, 3 children, and we became, all 3 of us, diehard readers. We read incredibly much. I made my parents buy an encyclopedia of children's literature, even though I couldn't read because I was 4. Someone told me that they caught my brother, my younger brother, at the UH parking lot reading. And I'm thinking, well, what, he was not in the car reading, he was standing in the parking lot reading. And I thought, I wonder what was so engrossing. And our baby brother taught us older siblings to learn to love sci-fi fantasy. So yeah, I read the original Dune before it became a movie, and I've read Lord of the Rings like 8 times. And this is the funny thing about seeds, because I remember in college, my speech professor, it was oral interpretation. She said to me, I write too, you should write. And I'm thinking, how do you know? You're a speech teacher. We don't do much writing in a speech class. But along the way, every so often, people would say, you should write, you should. And I would think, what? Everything's been written. What do I write about? And it went that way until I got this wording from God: warrior, priest. I thought, okay, that's the Shaolin monks in China who practice Kung Fu. That's the Knights Templar during the Crusades in the Middle Ages. Well, what does that have to do with me? Then all of a sudden, one day, another word popped in between: warrior, princess, priest. I thought, what is this? Disney movie? Warrior, princess? I didn't understand, so I did what I normally do. I analyzed it, a spreadsheet, like 20-something different categories of each of the 3 roles, how they were different, how they were the same. It didn't help. Then along the way, I was fortunate enough to come across a life coach. At first I thought, I'm retired, why do I need a life coach? Especially one that used to be an executive business coach. But Jeff was incredibly provocative. So about the second year that I was with him, we came up with this idea of writing a novel, which is just crazy. I never thought I could do something like that. I'm not creative enough. But I was desperate, so it was like exploring, what does warrior, royalty, priest mean? We've got the example of the British royal family. All the men are in the military, and even Queen Elizabeth was a mechanic during World War II. And then it's that, so they're all royal, but they serve in the military, and the monarch is the head of the Church of England. So I had that example. It's not that wild. The other thing was I needed closure on my husband's dying. He was ill for 10 years and took 10 months to die. And I really hadn't resolved that period of our lives. I think that people in crisis step up to the plate. They cope. They do whatever that needs to be done. But it's only after the crisis is over that you can stop and think about, what was that? What happened? And so I put that into the novel. It's about a princess who hates being royal, but, she's stuck with it. And I went through her lifespan, most of her lifespan. And when it came to the part about her husband going through 2 strokes and 2 cancers, people probably think, oh, that's a little much, don't you think, even for a novel? But that's what actually happened to my husband. And I remember when I was writing those chapters, I couldn't just jump into it. I had to take a deep breath and gird myself. And even though it was reliving that trauma, it was getting it outside of my head and onto paper. So at the end, I was relieved because it wasn't running around inside of me. It was now on paper. Yes, fictionalized, but still outside of me. And it was such a relief. And you don't know in the process how things go. One of the mental, insightful breakthroughs I had was in writing about how the princess, now an empress, is bemoaning how she was so terrible and she could never forgive herself because she blamed her husband for the deaths of their children and left him to suffer for 3 years. Her second husband is saying, "You're not perfect. Can you forgive yourself? Your first husband the emperor would not have wanted you to be like this because he loved you. And I understand what that is because I love you too. So do us all a favor and forgive yourself." And she thought and said, if God can forgive me, if her husband, Alex, can forgive me, then yes, I can forgive myself. And that was such a big breakthrough for me because I wasn't perfect crisis is messy. And I wish I had been this perfect, ideal person, and I wasn't. So I felt guilty, and it's like in writing the book, helping the characters find themselves, I found myself. So it's kind of like you don't know, you go with the flow as to what it is that people have planted seeds in your life, and you have planted seeds in other people's lives. You don't necessarily see the harvest, but it will come. I was stunned at what came out as I wrote this novel. Like, what? Because I'm not that creative. Where are these stories coming from? But I'm here as a testimony to say, hey, how many of you are under 78, by the way? Under 78? Okay, you got time. Remember now, Grandma Moses started at 78. Okay, I wrote my first hymn only a few years ago that got sung in 2 different denominations. I only published my novel this year, and I'm in my 70s. Like, it's like you can do so much more than you think. So even in your small little interactions with other people in your day. And you don't know the potential you have inside of you that you've been maybe suppressing or not paying attention to. So I'm saying, let the seeds grow and find your own harvest. But it starts with you believing. Remember that you come from original source, original creation, original creator. You are made imago Dei, in the image of God, with all of those tremendous potentials. And every person is a universe, still yet to be explored. Keep growing, keep sowing seeds, and harvest them in your life as well. Amen.